we can't eliminate that risk for as long as there's a nation like Russia that's prepared to deploy very considerable resources from their intelligence world against us. And we've got to remember they're going for targets of intent that they're interested in. So government, businesses, particularly in the defense sector, and so on, but also targets of opportunity. They're just scanning broadly, looking for institutions, companies, charity that haven't updated their software, haven't patched their software, and then they can exploit that and possibly use that to piggyback to attack more significant targets.
Cyber warfare is a daily reality for Britain. Those were the words, that's the warning from Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, talking to the NATO Cyber Defence Conference in London this afternoon. There has now been £8 million allocated to boost cyber defences and AI security research. Let us get the assessment and the thoughts of Sir David Omand, the former director of GCHQ. Good afternoon to you, Sir David.
Good afternoon, John.
Hi, and Brian Lord is with us too, the former Deputy Director of Intelligence and Cyber Operations at GCHQ. Hello to you, Brian.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, you're very welcome, both of you. Look, so we can now pretty well clearly see, because the reports are pretty frequent, that the cyber attacks against this country are serious and they're getting worse and worse. What are your thoughts, Sir David?
You're right, they are serious. They're not new. But the potential use of artificial intelligence to make malware more effective in the hands of cyber attackers is just one development that we've seen. But we're also vulnerable, and we shouldn't forget just how vulnerable our infrastructure is to cyber attack, partly because of neglect in the past to invest, partly just because it hasn't been seen as a sufficiently high priority. Well, now we have this wake-up call from Pat McFadden. I think it's an important, well-timed speech. And it's basically saying, be more vigilant, wake up to what is actually happening today. It's not just Russia, North Korea, Iran, other nations, but China, but the immediate problem, I think, is the intensification of attacks by Russian intelligence agencies and Russian hacker groups that are sponsored and overseen by those intelligence agencies, in part as a response to the support we're giving Ukraine.
Brian Lord, then, former Deputy Director of Intelligence at GCHQ. What can you tell us about the threat, in particular from Russia, and the way that they've been using different organisations, some of them state-organised, some of them private contractors, if I could use that phrase? It sounds as if it's coming at us from so many different directions.
Well, indeed it is, and I think this has been a technique used by many of our adversaries, particularly Russian in this case. And I think one of the advantages that a adversarial state can have is that attribution of these attacks is a lot more difficult to attribute than perhaps a more conventional military attack. So what you have are the state apparatus, or using proxy groups to be able to conduct simultaneous attacks against all different parts of the UK economy, not just our critical national infrastructure, but our commercial entities, some of our local authorities, indeed, in a systemic way without necessarily getting their hands visibly dirty. And I think when we're in a period of geopolitical tension, increased geopolitical tension as we are now, then it's inevitable those are going to increase from every direction. So sort of pick up David's point, this is nothing new, it's just increasing in its intensity, and it's probably only going to get worse as geopolitical tensions worsen.
So David, are we really helpless in the face of this threat? When you look at the kind of targets that have been cited as potentially vulnerable, they range from, well, the capacity to turn our lights out to a capacity to stop the NHS functioning properly, to even hitting our education system and commercial interests as well. Are we just helpless?
No, we're not. If we resolve to make this an all-of-nation effort to toughen ourselves up against this kind of malicious cyber activity, then we can reduce the risk very considerably. We can't eliminate that risk for as long as there's a nation like Russia that's prepared to deploy very considerable resources from their intelligence world against us. And we've got to remember they're going for targets of intent that they're interested in. So government, businesses, particularly in the defense sector, and so on, but also targets of opportunity. They're just scanning broadly, looking for institutions, companies, charity that haven't updated their software, haven't patched their software, and then they can exploit that and possibly use that to piggyback to attack more significant targets. So there's a great deal we can do just to do the basics. When you think of the North Korean attack on the National Health Service, the WannaCry attack, there were parts of the health system that hadn't afforded the latest versions of Microsoft, and therefore they were wide open because even the systems were so old that even Microsoft had stopped supporting them. Now, that's a very false economy, and it resulted in harm to the public, harm to patients, operations delayed, and so on. And the same could be true of a great deal of our infrastructure.
And Brian Lord, we got some very highly trained, sophisticated operators helping with our defence against this kind of attack. But it sounds as if we do need to be ready for this to happen again and again. It is part of our daily life now, Brian.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think we just have to recognise that the increase of our dependence upon the digital realm it simply means it's part of our mainstream activities, part of our day-to-day activities, and those who wish to disrupt that, whether for criminal or state reasons, will be able to do that. And I think being able to, as David said, I think being able to put the protection of our systems into the mainstream of government activity, critical national infrastructure activity, and wider commercial activity is just it's just an organizational business necessity now. I don't think anymore it's become optional. It's just become part of routine day-to-day business.
And so, David, just finally, I mean, over the weekend there was a lot of reporting about a highly sophisticated, deeply penetrative attack in America from China into pretty much all of their sensitive systems. Is it an option, you'd imagine it might be, for us to use retaliation as a defense? We could do to them what they are doing to us.
I think you have to think through very carefully indeed. There's no point in retaliation. It simply makes the other side annoyed by shining the lights out in the Kremlin. No doubt. That's good to do that. That wouldn't stop. That wouldn't stop the problem.
Okay. So, I think I'm going to have to jump in there. This line is breaking up a little bit, hopefully for natural causes, not through any means of any malign intent by anyone. Intervening in a very interesting conversation. Got to move on though.